I had the chance to talk with legendary Congressman and civil rights pioneer John Lewis last night. He was in town for a talk on voting rights, and ahead of that, he sat down for an interview at the Kennedy Institute for the U.S. Senate. Lewis worked closely with Senator Ted Kennedy, who took office just 3 years before the Voting Rights Act. So I started off by asking the congressman about Kennedy's role in the civil rights movement.
He showed us the right way. He was, in a sense, a shepherd, leading a flock. He was always encouraging. He was always speaking up. He visited Georgia. He visited Mississippi. We could always call on him. He was always there when we needed him.
You know, I've followed your career for a long time. I've always found you a person of great hope. But 48 years after the Voting Rights Act, when you see the Supreme Court gut a key provision of the Voting Rights Act, essentially saying that in those states that have a history of racial discrimination in elections, they'll get rid of that pre-approval thing if they want to change the laws. At moments like that, don't you begin to lose hope, Congressman?
When the Supreme Court gutted the heart of the Civil Rights Bill of 1965, I wanted to cry, but I couldn't cry. But I still believe, I'm still hopeful that we will fix what the Supreme Court did.
But it's against the context. You the other day were arguing for the elimination of the Confederate flag on federal grounds. I didn't even know it was on federal grounds. Congress tabled it. We have a disproportionate share of young black men in prisons. We have critics of the president saying we should take our country back. You didn't hear that kind of language with a white president. Do you not say to yourself, one step forward and two steps back?
In spite of all of the difficulties, in spite of all of the individuals saying we want our country back, saying that we've done enough, how much more, we must still press forward. We will get there. We will get there one day.
You were on that bridge, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, 50 years ago. I read you said you thought you were going to die on the day that really changed history. You had a legendary backpack, and I read that you had 2 books in it and an apple, correct?
Had 2 books, an apple, toothpaste, and toothbrush.
Because you thought you were going to be in prison and needed something to read and take care of your dental hygiene or whatever.
I thought we would be arrested and jailed. I wanted to have 2 books, something to read. I had an apple, something to eat. 1 apple wouldn't last that long. But somehow, in some way, I felt in my guts that we would prevail.
What were those books?
One was the political tradition by a professor of political science at Harvard. And the other one was the teaching of a monk.
If I had met you that day, and I had said to you, 50 years from now, a black president of the United States is going to stand and speak on this very same bridge. You, the head of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, big-time young organizer, what would you have said to me?
50 years ago, I probably would have said, do you know what you're talking about? Are you crazy? If someone had told me then that we had made as much progress as we made in 50 years, I would have said, I don't think so.
How much do you think about the man? He'd be 86, I think, today. How much do you think about Reverend King and the intervening years? And do you ever say to yourself, if he were only here for this or for that issue, do you think about him and what it'd be like today?
I often think about Martin Luther King, Jr. I think about Robert Kennedy. I think about President Kennedy. And I think about Ted Kennedy. These young men have changed America forever. I don't know what our country would be like today without the contribution they made.
What if they were here today?
If they were here today, I think we would be much further along down the road. I remember meeting with President Kennedy for the first time and being in his presence the day of the March on Washington, when the march was all over. President Kennedy was beaming like a proud father. He said to each one of us, you did a good job, you did a good job. And when he got to Dr. King, he said, you did a good job and you had a dream.
So we know all the times you marched when you were young with men and women who shared your goals. But I learned you marched with a different generation at a place that I was surprised to see you. You put together this book with some of your friends called March. It's a graphic novel about you and the struggles and those sort of things. You put on the same trench coat, the same backpack, and marched with kids at Comic-Con. Do I have that right?
Well, I put on a backpack and a trench coat.
Same thing you wore the day on that bridge.
Well, I was playing my own stuff. Comic-Con it's coming, but it's beautiful. You see hundreds and thousands of people. You see a sense of community. And to be able to walk through the hallway, down a convention floor with all of these young, beautiful children and telling them about the movement, about the philosophy of nonviolence, saying to them that you must love everybody and never hate. It was a good feeling.
Do they get it? Do young kids get it when they maybe see you in a book or read about you in a history book and they understand? Most of them know who Reverend King was, I assume. But do they buy your message, or do they say that's a message of a different time?
No, the young people get it. They get it. I see young people in the second, third grade saying to me things like, it tend to blow my mind. They said, "Why are you so awesome?" You know, I don't have an answer. I just said I just try to do what is right, what is fair. I try to be kind to everybody.
Well, speaking of awesome, before you go, everybody in America has seen this video of you in your office dancing for at least 2 minutes. Look at the look on your face. To Pharrell Williams' Happy. What, is that how you reduce stress, relieve stress? What are you doing?
Well, I love the song. I love the song. And for the most part, I'm a happy guy. Happy. And I tell people in my own family, cousins and second and third and fourth cousin, I tell my own staff, I tell members of Congress, be happy, enjoy life.
Congressman, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much.
Good to meet you, sir. Thank you.
You know, many of us can talk the talk. John Lewis walked the walk as well. He helped make history on that bridge 50 years ago, and he's still marching for justice today.